Hi, Wayne Doorband here for the Biweekly NTP CEED webinar Huddle that we hold here at our Northern Colorado headquarters in Loveland, Colorado, both live here at our site and also going out over the web to those of you that are watching. Enjoy what we have for you today. And we are excited to have Jeff Finkle with us here today, Executive Director of the International Economic. He's going to say a bunch of other things, but I'm not going to do that because I want to make sure we get right to Jeff and respect his time. I know there's a bunch of you out there that are watching. I appreciate you being patient with us. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, and it is a gorgeous day here in Colorado, and we've actually got John Nillen on also, who's good friends with Jeff, and John's the one that helped this set up. So, John, how are you?
Doing well today, and Jeff, thanks again for your patience.
Yeah, not a problem. I see about half of my staff is watching this as well. Wayne was saying that this was a large audience. I see Eli, probably Aaron Wade, Jason Christian, Hong Fei, Kaylin, Tatiana, Vinny Femia, and probably Will Hersey. So I bring an audience when I participate.
You do, Jeff. We thank you for that. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but because we're transitioning, we've moved from one location to another. We haven't been advertising a lot for the live portion of this, where we really get a lot of attendance, and there will be a lot of people that will come in and watch this, is when we replay it. So Leanne does an amazing job of editing and makes it all come together. So even for your staff, if they really want to see Jeff the Star, they need to come back in and watch the replay that they'll get a notification of, because they'll get to see a number of the different videos that she's showing here, different clips. We probably got one of you in your diapers even. Oh, no, I doubt that. So.
Yeah, I don't think, I know my mother's internet is down, so I know Kaylin couldn't get that picture.
Jeff, thanks so much, and again, we've known each other now. I almost even hate to think it's probably been at least 15 years, maybe even a little longer. And I met Jeff when John and I both got started working with the base redevelopment part of our business back in 1988, and I just see my screen's gone. I guess it's back. And we probably met you not too long, in the early 90s, so it's been at least 10 years. Anyway, it's been a long time. You've transitioned. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your current situation with IEDC, and just as much as you want to talk about in terms of your role, what you do, what the entity does, and so on.
So Wayne, I celebrated my 28th anniversary at the International Economic Development Council on August the 1st. IEDC was a merger between two groups. I was actually hired on August 1st, 1986 by the Council for Urban Economic Development. In 2001, we merged with the American Economic Development Council. And both of those organizations were trying to create, retain, expand jobs, develop tax base, and enhance wealth in the communities where our members work. But as you know, that doesn't tell the complete story. Along the way, we have actually managed a couple other associations. We managed NADE, the National Association of Installation Developers, for about 10 years, and that ended about 4 years ago. They, in turn, changed their name while we were managing them to the Association of Defense Communities. We also managed the Association of University-Related Research Parks, and we managed them for about 3 years in the 90s or early 2000s. So IEDC is all about economic development and its deployment in a whole variety of different forms and formats. And IEDC and its staff have some core competencies, and One of those core competencies has been association management, and as you and John and I met when we were managing the Association of Defense Communities for many years. Some of those issues, even that we were dealing with then, transition or stay with IEDC. We're interested in brownfield redevelopment. We're interested in base redevelopment still. Those issues carry forward into a variety of other federal activities. We've been working with the Department of Energy on the downsizing of some of their facilities as well.
The current status, have you, are you either looking for or are you involved in any other associations that you manage right now?
No, we're actually not managing any other associations now. But one of the interesting things is we have grown phenomenally since our merger. We took on the management of both AURP and NAID / the Association of Defense Communities when we were QED. We started, when I began at QED in 1986, we had less than a $900,000 budget. We're nearly a $6 million a year operation now. And frankly, we didn't miss a beat as we were no longer managing the Association of University Research Parks or the Association of Defense Communities, because after merger, we've continued to expand our scope and size and services, and we have nearly 30 staff and kind of run to keep up with the things we're working on here. We could manage another association, I suppose, but we've been looking more for indigenous growth than outside management contracts.
I kind of figured that from our conversations earlier, and that your current strategy or attitude was that to really grow IDC and not to necessarily be involved in the association management side. So that said, good transition. What would you say are the 4 or 5 things that IEDC is most active in working on today?
So there's a variety of issues that we're focused on now, and one of the points that I make to darn near anybody that I talk to about what an association does, all associations look the same. They hold conferences, they hold seminars, they do training, they may certify things, they may accredit things, they hold webinars, they produce publications. So, we're no different than a nurses association, a podiatrist association, a beekeepers association when you just look at them as associations. What separates all associations? What's the content of what they do? And the big content areas for us recently have been, and ever since 2005, one of the economic development activities we've been spending a lot of time dealing with is what happens after a community gets hit with a disaster, and how does a community deal with economic recovery. So 2005 is when Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. We deployed a great number of volunteers. We have a wonderful website called restoreyoureconomy.org. That's one of the things that we have spent a fair amount of time focused on. We have put out some important major white papers. During the recession, manufacturing got clobbered here in the United States and got clobbered in places like Mexico and Canada as well. We put out a major white paper on how do we restore manufacturing, and we've looked at the issues around workforce. We've learned about the cost of doing business in the U.S. versus Asia. We have been working with other people talking about reshoring in bringing jobs back. We followed that up with a major white paper on the whole immigration debate. How do we bring smart people in, and how do we deploy the people that are not that have been here for some time, who are undocumented. Some people refer to them as illegal. I refer to them as undocumented. And how do we bring them once we end up with some immigration reform? The third area that we've been spending a fair amount of time focused on, and we're doing a major white paper this year, is on the whole workforce issue. Many manufacturers, many companies are talking about the skill gap that we have, and we've been focused on the skill gap and issues that are necessary to have this generation of workers be prepared for the manufacturing plant of today and that of the future. We've also spent a fair amount of time with our members talking about foreign direct investment and thinking about how do you export products from various communities. So those are some of the big issues that our members have been focused on.
Jeff, today, as you work in the first of those you talked about, and they all seem to be linked a little bit, related to economic catastrophes that strike communities, and they can be physical in terms of storms and such like Katrina, or they can be the loss of employment through a base closure or a large company leaving. In those contexts, do you collaborate? I'm assuming you. How does that work, and when you're working in that kind of a circumstance?
So we collaborate in a whole variety of ways. One, our work requires funding. So when we do our economic recovery work, we have had one major funder throughout all of that work, and that's the Economic Development Administration of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Most of the deployment is deployment of our members, with the staff helping our members and writing reports and directing the effort, but our members are critical because they give up their time and provide energy and volunteer resources in the various places that we work. We've also had some other funders. Southwest Airlines, for instance, is helping us with plane tickets to get some of our members to some of the communities where we're providing some assistance. In fact, Wayne, you guys were hard hit out in the Colorado Springs area, and we had a team out in Colorado Springs about 4 to 6 weeks ago looking at some of the issues around recovery from some of the heavy flooding and rains you guys had in Colorado.
Oh, that's great. What is there about what you're doing now that just generally those people who are listening to this can help with? And I want to hit on this now, and then we'll kind of end with it also. And then I want to talk a little bit more about you personally, which we've prepared a bunch of questions that we actually let you look at ahead of time.
So how can people help? I'm not sure they can help us as much as the communities that are hard hit. It's interesting to watch after in New Orleans when the Deepwater Horizon busted up out in the Gulf Coast. The tourism industry was devastated in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, went over all the way to the panhandle of Florida. After the hurricane hit the New Jersey coast, tourism was hard hit. There are ways that we can all help communities recover. Take our vacations in different places. Buy goods from companies in those places. Get on a plane and help restore houses after a major disaster. There's actually tourism that people do where they volunteer their time and they go to various places to help recover. The number of volunteers that I saw in New Orleans after Katrina hit was just absolutely mind-numbing. In fact, you guys may remember that when we were in New Orleans with an ADC conference, the members, the Association of Defense Communities, actually went out and helped rebuild a house. And we can all do that after a major disaster.
Well, that's great. So I'm going to move into the little more personal side. People love to hear about leaders and what they do, and we always get some great insight from some of these questions that we've developed. And I'm going to start with this one. When you were 15 years old, and it was just a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and you could be doing pretty much anything you wanted to be doing, what is it we'd find you doing, Jeff?
Well, the funny thing of it is, I'm not sure that I had any self-intentions at that point in time. My parents instilled in me a lot of discipline. People who know me may not think I'm that disciplined, but I started a paper route when I was 12. I was mowing lawns on weekends. In the winter, all of my paper customers seemed to call me to shovel snow. For better or for worse, I was making money. And it always seemed that I had a to-do list that was longer than most 15-year-olds would have, and I didn't know any better. There was kind of that expectation that I would be somewhat directed, and if I made a commitment to mow somebody's lawn, I was in their backyard mowing the lawn. When the newspapers got dropped off at my house at 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, I was either on my bike or with a bag over my shoulder delivering the newspapers. So was I using any judgment at that point that newspapers or playing some basketball or newspapers or playing some gin rummy? I think my dad would have had my head, if nothing else, if I didn't focus on the things I committed to. So maybe that explains why I've stayed at the same job for 28 years. When I start something, I finish it.
Right. An associated question then. You've talked a little bit about your mom earlier, and not that she probably wouldn't be on the internet right now. You just mentioned your dad. Tell us where you grew up and just a little bit more about maybe all the way through your even college years. Just sort of quick study of your life prior to going out into the work world in a outside of school way.
I grew up in a town of 42,000 population just east of Columbus, Ohio, called Newark, Ohio. The funny thing about Newark, Ohio, in about 1960, it was the lawnmower capital of the world. There were more lawnmowers made in Newark, Ohio than any place else. And I see, I'm looking at a little picture on the screen here. The most famous building probably in my hometown is a basket building. It's about 7 or 8 stories tall. We are now probably the basket weaving capital of America. I had some friends that probably went to Ohio University and majored in basket weaving. They actually have a place to go and get employment. This is Longaberger baskets. The U.S. can compete with China on baskets, but only by people who are willing to pay too much for one of these things, because these are collector's items. Newark was a wonderful middle American town. You couldn't get hurt there. It was, you could ride your bike downtown. You didn't have to worry about really anything in this little burg that we grew up in. I'm flying back to Ohio tomorrow. My parents at age 88, my mother and my father, 91, are still alive, living in their own home, and I'm going back and seeing them for a long weekend.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And I can relate a little. I spend a lot of time on business in the Ohio and Dayton area. You're very close. I think they're a little farther south to Scott lawn, care, and obviously they develop probably similar time frame as these lawnmower companies. So that's very, very Midwestern and one I can relate to too. John, do you have any questions? I actually have one from the audience here I'm going to ask. Hong Fei asks, what kind of distance could you get on your newspaper throws?
So I'm not going to answer that until we talk about Hong Fei for a minute. We're very proud to have Hong Fei on our staff. He's from Upper Mongolia, if I remember correctly. He is an Ohio University graduate, which is my alma mater. I happened to meet him when he was traveling through Washington a number of years ago, and Hong Fei works on computers here at the office and helps us keep our technology up to date, and we're real pleased to have him with us. I think it depended upon the size of the paper, how far you could throw a paper. If it was a Saturday afternoon paper, you could roll them real tight, and you could probably throw them 40 or 50 feet, and then the question was accuracy. Did you actually hit somebody's porch? If it was a Wednesday or Thursday paper, there tended to be a little bit heavier advertising and a little more difficult to throw them. But the better story behind that is I learned to fold a paper from my father, and my father was a paper boy for the Newark Advocate as he was growing up as well. And the story that he tells that is absolutely priceless is they grew up, my dad and his two brothers, with his grandmother living in their home. And his grandmother used to sit on a rocking chair on the front porch of their home in Newark, Ohio, and she used to fold their papers as his brothers and he went off on their paper routes. So I'm probably folding the paper the same way that Gladys Musgrove, my grandmother, her mother taught my brothers or uncles how to fold the newspaper. And to this day, if I'm walking in the neighborhood with a dog, I will fold a paper and throw it up on somebody's porch.
Isn't it interesting how our pasts influence us, which leads into the next question. And maybe you've already talked about it, but what kind of, can you remember an event from your childhood, so probably let's say high school, you and your career and just in your life sense, because there's some event without having to think about it for a long time that you can think of?
Well, there's actually two events that really were altering of my life, and one of them really was taking on the paper route. I took on a paper route at the age of 12, and I will tell you that there is nothing about a paper route and the management of a paper route that I don't deal with every day today as somebody who has run a not-for-profit business for 28 years. You worry about marketing. How many widgets are you going to sell? In my case, it was newspapers. Today it's memberships and conference registrations, but you watch and you try to grow your business. Second, you have to deal with collections. What's your cash flow look like? You've got to pay your bills, and have you gotten the income from your customers? Third, are your customers happy with you? Are you delivering your goods on time? Are you delivering their newspapers dry? Are they happy with you, and are you following up with them carefully enough to make sure that they stay customers for a long time? I was lucky. I did newspapers for 5 years, and we've stayed on this part of the topic for maybe too long, but I was Newspaper Boy of the Year twice in my hometown. But the second thing I was lucky about is somehow or another when I was in junior high school, somebody suggested I join the debate team for our junior high. That ended up taking me into high school and then providing me a scholarship to college, and has served me ever since. You have to think quick. You have to be able to speak. You have to be able to articulate your thoughts in a way that people understand them. And those are probably the two lucky things that happened to me as a child that has stayed with me ever since.
It hit me as you were talking about the paper route that the book that's out there, All I Ever Needed to Know in Life I Learned in Kindergarten. Maybe we could change that and say, all I never needed to learn and know in business I learned on a paper route. So
I couldn't agree more.
So changing a little bit, and as you know, our entity, the Center for Economic Excellence and Development, and our companies that reside in that entity, Nourish the Planet and others, are very interested in sustainability. Tour coming right after the webinar today of a large group that is permaculture oriented. I know you and I have talked about this. Tell me about some things that IEDC is doing related to sustainability, and then let's proceed it with a question of what is, in your mind, the definition of the word sustainability, and then obviously you'll relate that to IEDC and things that you're doing with that.
So, the word has about as many definitions as people who talk about it, but we talk about sustainability in two ways. And you and I will have talked more about the second way that I'm going to refer to sustainability. And in the economic development space, one of the ways we use sustainability is something economically sustainable. If you start a project, you start an organization, you start to do something, is there traction for it over time? I think I would be remiss by not using that definition of sustainability, because we do use that in our business on a regular basis. But when you and I talk about sustainability, we're talking about the environmental impacts of things. And IEDC has actually done a fair amount in the area of sustainability. And we got started on this probably about the same time this president took office. IEDC was brought to a gathering at the Rockefeller Brothers Fund in New York, and they were a foundation that was particularly interested in, I think, seeing some type of carbon tax be put on emissions of carbon. Now, as we all know, that was not very popular in various circles, and there was also the belief that that would be a job killer. So IEDC, with the help of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and IEDC did not take any position on a carbon tax of any sort. We took a kind of a wait-and-see attitude in terms of how a piece of legislation like that would work its way out. But what we started to do is say, all right, if this became law, and if there became a tax on carbon, would this be as many people were suggesting? And so we started looking at what was going on in the economy. There was certainly a number of people who were trying to see the U.S. and our businesses and as individuals be more responsible in terms of the pollution that we produce. And we started looking at wind power. We started looking at all types of alternative fuels and zero energy use homes. And if anybody is interested in some of the work that IEDC has done on sustainability around some of those and some of the state policies that exist around the country, they can go to our website, which is www.iedconline.org. Go to our publications section of our website, and there are a number of free downloads. These publications were paid for by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, a group called the Energy Foundation out in San Francisco, and the U.S. Department of Energy helped pay for some of the work that we've done. So we are continuing to be in the energy space, and you know, what is best for the United States first, and what is best is an economy that produces its own energy, an economy that produces lots of its own jobs, and if we can do things that where people are fixing solar panels versus importing oil from Saudi Arabia, that's best for our economy. So those are some of the issues around sustainability that we've been focused on.
Just one follow-on question there that's not sustainability oriented, but I just there at the end. How much of your involvement is truly international versus U.S. oriented, and do you work on initiatives that might be in, you know, Ecuador or whatever, depending on the interest, or are you, even though the name is International Economic Development Council, you're really very much more U.S. focused than you are international?
We are, the I in IEDC is certainly aspirational. We, when we were founded, or when we merged in 2001, we were merging a thing called the National Council for Urban Economic Development and the American Economic Development Council, and that did not reflect a growing internationalization of economic development and a growing membership of people in one or both organizations. And so we took a bold step, maybe a little bit arrogant step, and we called ourselves the International Economic Development Council. At our annual conference, which will be in Fort Worth in October, you know, we will hope to have 8 to 10% of the people in attendance will hopefully be international members. By the way, I see that the graph that is showing is Rachel Carson's Silent Spring book. What was funny about my conversation a little bit ago about being a junior high schooler and participating in debate, the first national debate topic when I was in high school was on a national environmental policy, and Rachel Carson's book was certainly the tome everybody was quoting about that time.
Wow. I don't think I've ever asked you. Over the last 6 or 7 years, I've created a relationship with a fellow who you might know, and I just am curious if you do, because he's involved in economic development and in D.C. Sam Beard, do you know Sam? Is that a name that rings a bell to you?
I've known Sam since 1981. Sam was the founder of the National Development Council. Sam lives over in Delaware, and the National Development Council is very important in the field of economic development. They helped set up many of the SBA 504 community lending organizations around the country. Bob Davenport is a friend of mine who is the president of the National Development Council, and NDC does all of our organization's finance training courses. So I haven't seen Sam in years, but know him quite well. Funny story about Sam. When I was at HUD in the early 1980s, Sam was trying to talk to my then boss, who was Assistant Secretary Steve Bollinger, and he heard Steve was going on a plane out to California, and told Steve, he said, I'll call the airline and I'll get a seat right next to you. Sam flew from Washington, D.C. to California, and the two of them talked all the way out Steve went to do his business. Sam got on the next plane, flew back to Washington, D.C.
That doesn't surprise me, and I'll give you another time some not quite as dramatic stories about sort of just something most people wouldn't do, but some interactions that I've had with Sam. Sam's been a little bit of a mentor to me over the last several years, as one of the things I've transitioned into is managing a nonprofit, which is called the Institute of Ecolonomics, and Sam actually knew Dennis Weaver, who was the founder of that entity, and I was introduced to Sam through Stu Lichter, who was one of our board members. And anyway, long story. I stay actually pretty closely in touch with Sam, and you and I can talk about that later. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Sam's an interesting guy. We'll interview him. We'll interview him one of these times on one of our webinars.
Yeah, give him my regards.
Okay, great. You know, this is a real fun one. Tell us about a negative experience that you've had in your life, really could be any time, that really turned out to become a real positive, meaning that out of it came a positive outcome of some kind that you can still remember and talk about today. So people like to kind of know about those kinds of things because we all have it happen.
You know, I'm sure Kaylin told me to think about this before I got on here, and I think I failed to do so, but I have one. I was very fortunate as a college student that I came to Washington and spent a summer. And you know, coming out here and being a summer intern was just a fabulous experience for me. Grew up in a small town, went to school in a small town, so I really never had experienced big city life. And I came out to Washington, and it was just an absolutely eye-opening experience. So after college, I went to Columbus, Ohio, and I worked for about 4 years, and I started dating a young woman. And lo and behold, I think in hindsight the term is unrequited love. But I thought I was head over heels in love, and I'm not sure she was. So she ends up, a headhunter finds her and says, we've got a job for you in Washington, D.C. Now, she was just insecure enough, though, that she said to me, you should come out and move out to Washington with me. And so I did. But I refused to move until I found a job. And that 3 or 4 months between the time that she had moved out here and I moved out, she had moved on with her life. And I will tell you the normal heartbreak and things that one goes through, you know, hit me like a ton of bricks, like it does many other people. But she did me a huge favor. I never went back to Columbus. You know, I was becoming a big fish in a small pond, and all of a sudden I became a small fish in a big pond, with the job opportunities that much better, with the ability for promotions that much better, and you know, I thank my lucky stars that I made the decision to come out here, maybe for some of the wrong reasons, but it has been a very good experience for me overall. And you know, here I am that many years later, feeling like my life has been worth something along the way.
That's a great lesson for folks, and that's not probably a totally unusual story. Love wrong, and again, it seemed horrible as it broke apart, but like you said, it ended up with a very positive outcome. What's a key skill that you've learned in the very recent past? So something last couple years that you find yourself using more today?
I try to use humor a lot more than I used to, and it's funny. I I've had some bad luck with the last year and a half. I've broken my ankle. I've had 3 operations, and it's what's funny is I find that the worse the situation, the more likely I deploy humor. And I'm not sure I ever did that before, but what I find, and maybe it's a defensive technique, that if you feel that people think you're funny, if you think they like you, they will take better care of you. And when you're in the hospital, you want people really paying a lot of attention to you because you're fearful of the situation that you find yourself in. Particularly if you're going under the knife, which I've unfortunately done 3 times. Not that none of them, one of them more serious than the other 2, but I would have everybody in stitches around me, and I would be in stitches later because they were actually cutting on me. But that's all tongue in cheek. I think that's the lesson that I've learned, and I watch some people get grumpy, order people around when they get in these bad situations. That's how their nervous reflexes are working. Mine tends to work a slightly different way, and I've found it quite valuable and actually quite fun.
That is a lesson. That's what's cool about these. Well, there's so much positive in that. I sure wish that I would take that attitude a little more. I'm going to try to hopefully learn from that. Try to turn negatives into a little more humor, and I know that would be helpful for everyone around me. 2 more questions, and then anybody online, if you've got questions, make sure to put them on the chat, and anybody here live, we've got some folks in the room. Think about some questions, and we'll end with that. But I got 2 more. This one is there a phrase or a quote from anyone famous, you decide what that definition is, that you remember, that's because it's memorable to you, it has an impact on you?
It has to do probably with because of my age, and it has to do with Kennedy's quote from his inauguration. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I think of that quite frequently when trying to decide what is the right thing to do. I think many people can still learn a lot from that phrase that he uttered in, I guess that would have been January 20th, 1961.
I think exactly right, Jeff. I would be real curious about how much of our audience has heard that quote. I hope a lot. I hope that is one of those quotes that perseveres. It's a great one. Well, I'm not seeing other questions here, and I have one last one that I'm going to throw out, but I told you before I'd do it at the end too, before I ask the last question. Is there anything else that you want to just tell us? Anything else again about IEDC or that we could think about, that we could help with? And, I posed that earlier, or just anything before I ask you the last question.
Well, I think IEDC is making a lot of difference for our economic development members across the country, and frankly, if if people have businesses who are thinking about expanding in their communities, talk to your local economic developer. That's what they're there to help with, and our job is to help them do their job well, and they can be quite a resource, and we would encourage people to work with them, or join their boards, join their advisory committees, and help grow your local wherever you might be.
That's great advice, and I would bet there is very few of those local groups that wouldn't greatly accept any help they can get, and probably are always looking for more volunteers.
Absolutely.
So that gets us to the last question. I'm not seeing the others online right now. And this is kind of a fun one. Gives people a little more insight into you. So let's pretend that you woke up this morning and you were obviously in a different place. You'd spent a little bit of time and you figured out that it's not Earth. You're in a different location, but it's a lot like Earth. People are friendly. Obviously, your needs are being met in terms of bodily functions and stuff. It sort of appears a lot the same. And all you find that you have is $500 and your laptop. What would you, and you've got 7 days now, what would you do over the next 7 days where the only thing you have in a place that's pretty much like it is now, but it's not the same place, with a laptop and $500?
Well, I'm not sure I'd do anything with the laptop. I might even lose the laptop because I wouldn't know who to communicate with, and that's what I use the laptop for. And no sense carrying it around if I can't communicate with any friends. So then I would have to explore and find out where I am, who are these people that I'm with. You know, hopefully meet somebody who would spend some time talking to me. Hopefully, I mean, one of my passions besides work and family is golf. Hopefully I'll find a golf course and explore the geography of where I am. I'll just want to learn about where I am, and not sure what I'll do with that information, because it sounds to me like 7 days later I will return to wherever I'm from, but sounds like it'll just be a heck of a great fun time.
Awesome. Well, you are the second of our guests in a row that said they'd lose the laptop. And the previous guest was a physician, actually, does medicine, and she said the same thing. Well, Jeff, this has been awesome. Again, as long as we've known each other, I always am amazed at how I learn new things about folks, and our audience does also. Again, iedconline.com or .org?
.org, iedconline.org.
.org. We'll be back again in 2 weeks. We've got another exciting speaker, and I'm sitting here, and I know I had the name in my head before. He's already booked, and I'm not remembering his right now, but we'll put the word out. All of the staff of Jeff, you guys look like you hung in here. Maybe you learned a little bit about Jeff, and now you can actually get some of that humor with him after the call. And as you guys get together again, Jeff, I look forward to actually maybe being with you live in October. We were talking about that, and let's reconnect and talk about some of the things that we talked about that we could be doing together with IEDC. Again, thank you so much. This has been great, and you should watch the replay also. I think you'll enjoy it.
Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, John. Take care, everyone.